Okay, my name is Jeremy. I'm an accredited psychotherapist, and I've been asked to speak today about some of the ways that I use visual media in my therapy. That is video, film, social media, fan fiction, music video, YouTube video, snippets and excerpts from visual media in order to illustrate and flesh out a psychological concept or a psychic concept or a therapy concept or an idea, a mood state, a process or a progress that's occurring in therapy where myself and my client might be struggling to understand just purely in narrative spoken form. So I find that the language of visuals can often be a more powerful and poignant language with which to explain abstract and deep and complex feelings. It's the whole point of art, frankly, art and culture, which in many ways can be far more poetic and poignant in explaining deep and multi-dimensional feeling states and thought states than just merely words or cognitive narrative processes alone. So yeah, the language of cinema, the language of visuals can be more poignant than just verbal-based narratives alone. So the excerpt I want to concentrate on today is probably the first one that I ever landed on. And I've been amassing full files of these cinematic and narrative excerpts and snippets with which I could potentially try to, it's not a wholly original idea, I know it, but to put together a suite of cinematic narrative approaches that might be able to expedite or make more meaningful psychological concepts. So it's a cinematic narrative approach that I'm toying with. I've been doing this for a number of years now. So the one that I want to start off with is an excerpt from a movie that came out in 1986 called The Mission. It starred Robert DeNiro. And there's an approximately 8-minute scene in this movie that, in my opinion, is a stunning visual illustration of the therapeutic journey. That is, what is the process of therapy? What is it that we're doing in this room together, therapist and client? It's very weird. It's artificial. It's, for some people, deeply intimidating, creepy, scary, abstract, pointless, hopeless. What is this journey that we're going through to speak of? How can we define it? How can we justify it? How can we illustrate it? How can we make it make sense? So this excerpt from The Mission, as I said, is a beautiful, poignant illustration of the process of therapy. What are we doing in therapy? But also, what is the experience of the wounded person prior to therapy, prior to transcendence from the mental health concerns that have made them become immobilized or have tied them up in knots or put them into a place which is very, very distressing. So a visual illustration of the therapeutic journey of the wounded individual, the burdened individual, their process to redemption and salvation, neatly played out in 5 minutes, 0 words. Thank you, The Mission, starring Robert DeNiro. So, yeah, this film stars De Niro as a character called Mendoza. Now, Mendoza is, just to set this scene up for for the viewer before I play it. Mendoza is a bad dude who does bad things. He's a thug. He's a mercenary. He's a slave trader and slaveholder. He's an assassin for hire. He is a man, a warrior stuck in aggression and perpetual irritation. He's lost in his aggressive arrogance. What works for him in the world of work and the world of masculine contestation, and remember this this movie is set in the grand colonial era of the 17th century, I believe it is, where European nations were basically, riding roughshod all over the world in colonial folly and expansion. And this particular colonialist expansion takes place in South America, where Mendoza is, hanging on in some kind of colonial outpost, living his rough warrior life. And what works for him in his work and in his contestation with other men and those who he needs to dominate is utterly useless in his romantic life, in his feeling life, in his emotional life. And thus we find that he is completely unable to manage a relationship. He is intimidating to his fiancée and scary. He's a boorish, piggish, arrogant, domineering man, not attractive. And what we find is, as the movie plays out, it is revealed that Mendoza's fiancée falls hopelessly in love with Mendoza's brother, who is the polar opposite to him psychically. Mendoza's brother is the man-child, the poet artist. He's a sensitive, gentle man with a highly developed feminine side, utterly irresistible to this woman and many women. The sensitive, gentle man, beautiful boy archetype, deeply in touch with his feminine side, highly developed anima from the Jungian concept. And when Mendoza finds out that they two are in love, he is utterly he spirals into a kind of inconsolable, incoherent, white hot rage, and unable to fully control himself, he challenges his brother to a duel and kind of accidentally on purpose kills him, and is racked with inconsolable, immobilizing grief, and confines himself to solitary confinement in some kind of subterranean dungeon, where he proceeds to stay stuck and immobilized until he is reluctantly dragged out of his self-exile by Jesuit missionaries who persuade him to come on the colonial mission to this kind of Amazonian wild rainforest kind of rainforest wilderness kind of paradise, but also chaotic wilderness, to go and preach the good word to the natives. So yeah, as I say, we're in the age of evangelical colonialism, which I understand is problematic, but in the current age. But nonetheless, I do propose that this film has a universal message, and and a gift that is universal. Its utility is warranted and has merit. So the video starts. This video excerpt starts after the exposition, or the colonial, they're Jesuits, I believe, after this party has been journeying for days through the jungle, and they're about to get to the final leg of their journey to meet the Amazonian tribe that they have been interacting with. But in order to do that, they have to scale this enormous, very steep, jagged, and incredibly wild waterfall terrain. So, as I say, Mendoza was only convinced. Mendoza was convinced by the Jesuits to come on this laboured journey, and he agreed only on the condition that he would, in some kind of bizarre rite of passage, kind of self-punishment rite of passage, he agreed to accompany these Jesuits through their jungle track only if he could, literally and figuratively, carry his burden literally with him for the entire journey, in the form of a rough hessian net full of the metaphorical and actual tools of his pain, his woundedness, his stock in trade, the stock in trade that dominated others and ultimately destroyed him. So here we have Mendoza struggling through the Amazonian jungle. Tied around his neck is a thick rope attached to a sack containing his swords, his armour, his helmets, his breastplates, his weapons of death, his weapons of war, that which killed his brother and have condemned him to a life of kill or be killed, dominate or be dominated, metaphorically, to fuck or be fucked. And the poignancy of this video is the metaphorical and visual representation of a wounded man's burden, which I think is one of the poignant, brilliant elements of this excerpt. So his armour, his weapons, drag behind him in a kind of quasi-human Sisyphean dung beetle representation. So, as I say, a Sisyphean dung beetle, he drags his psychologically shattered carcass through the Amazon, his psychological burden weighing on him in the real world, and also, by the way, negatively affecting everyone around him in the real world. Okay, we see Mendoza dragging his burden through this foreboding landscape. The other Jesuits also struggling. It's not easy for them, for anyone, burdened or unburdened, to get through. The poignant and affecting visual representation of the burdened pre-therapy man. The hauntingly beautiful score by Morricone, let's not forget. Exquisite, liminal. The burden, the danger. The haunted and he falls. Once again, to start the journey all over again like Sisyphus. The haunted, wounded, burdened man, full of self-loathing, the self-hating man of the 300-year-old colonial era, is the same self-hating man of our postmodern era. The emotionally wounded warrior, he who speaks to the tortured human soul. You and me, exhausted, fused to our burden, demonstratively burdened and suffering, dragging all of those around him down. How many of us can relate? The hero's journey, or is it the shero's journey too? Is this the unique journey of the male psychological subject, or is this the journey now of so many of our sisters in the postmodern world? I encourage the women commenters to illuminate us regarding the burden journey. And here we see the natives finally spotting the Jesuits. It's a happy welcome. There is brotherhood here, an exaltation and spiritual exchange. This is not a colonial exploitation exchange. The indigenous psyche is reconciled with itself. It's the Western psyche that's in flux, is dissonant. And here comes Mendoza, bedraggled, dirty, idiotic, the indigenous grabs a knife. When the grief work is done, the pain teacher has done her work, and the gods of suffering have been appeased. How do we liberate one from one's burden? Is this death? Is this assassination? The wild man of nature, of our own nature, the innocent and unpolluted parts of ourselves, liberate us, can cut the burdens from the psychotic and wounded parts. And the burden is expunged. And the wounded subject says, fuck you, says, thank you, I'm crying, I'm laughing. he's crazy, he's liberated. And no one can say it like the artists. And it brings tears to my eyes. It's poignant and affecting because this scene to me is what my clients go through spiritually, psychologically, symbolically. I couldn't think of a greater privilege or a more noble calling than to be a witness to this process. And I love this mission scene. And I love Robert DeNiro and all the actors here, and the beautiful Morricone soundtrack for so poignantly and exquisitely eloquently illuminating and illustrating such a complex psychodynamic process as what is the process of therapy. Thank you to the artists. And that should do it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. See you next time.